Continuing on with policy impact, let's look at fiscal impact. That includes tax and spending. Tax policy really has two aspects to it. The first one is to generate revenue, money, for the government to pay for their expenses and projects. So it's to raise revenue. That's one. So if you're looking at this, if a government raises revenue to have expenses, it has to either have a surplus, which means it's saving money and paying down debt, or it's balanced and revenues equal expenses, or expenses are greater than revenue, meaning you need to borrow, which means you have to pay it back. So that's the one, is to how do you balance that from a tax policy. And the second is to encourage certain behaviors and discourage other behaviors. These behaviors can be to incent spending by companies, and the intent is to use taxes to cause an action. So at one point, there were a lot of tax credits and incentives available to insulate your home, upgrade your heating system, your refrigerator. So you got tax credits for doing things to reduce energy consumption. Okay? You had been able to get a tax credit for electric vehicles. So there's a lot of different things that went into place to cause certain behaviors. You might tax others to reduce it. For example, cigarettes or alcohol. There's taxes on that. Some of it is revenue, but some of it is trying to change your behavior. Now, one of the things that happened is that the current tax rate for corporations is now a flat rate of 21%. So you have 15% was with the tax rate if you made under 50, so your rate went up. Everybody else went down substantially. You could see the corporations that earned over 10 million went from 35 to 21%. So that's a 14% savings. Now, the intent of that was that companies would reinvest in their business. Okay, that they'd make investment in research and development, in people, in new equipment, manufacturing facilities, distribution facilities, that they would spend the money which would spur the economy to growth and also to make it competitive with other countries. Now, what actually happened with that, the savings, the corporations did not make a substantial investment, so they did not engage in the behavior that the tax cut was intended for. Why didn't they? They didn't see any business opportunities that would produce a sufficient return for shareholders. Majority of the savings went to pay dividends to shareholders, buy back stock, reduce debt. So this is an important thing, not only in the area of finance, but when we look at organizational behavior, what ended up is that where money had hoped to go to workers has ended up with owners and senior people in a company. But it was intended to create certain behavior, and that behavior has not occurred. So when you look at this, what appears to be right now, there was a modest boost from U.S. tax reform, but as we move out, there's no real positive impact on the economy of that, even though that was what it intended to do. So now what we have is we have this budget that is now getting bigger and bigger every day, just as the base budget. It doesn't include anything that COVID-19 does. So again, we're borrowing, and we're not living within our means. From COVID-19 actions, this has moved quicker than ever before. Started on March 6th with the Corona's preparedness and response, $8.3 billion. This was pretty much dedicated to the healthcare side of research, of getting PPE, personal protection equipment, PPE, and helping get ready, $8.3 billion. Followed 2 weeks later by March 18th, the Families First Corona Response Act, $3.5 billion, which focused on supplemental nutrition programs and some unemployment benefits. Then, with remarkable speed, on March 27th, was the CARES Act, which stands for the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. That was $2 trillion. April 24th, the Paycheck Protection Program and Healthcare Enhancement Act put another $310 million in. There are now a number of other smaller programs, and now they're debating whether there should be another action to help. How does that $2 trillion break down? As you can see, individuals, $660 billion estimated, and that's in two categories. That's the $1,200 per citizen based on income limits, $500 for children under 18 or whatever it is. And then that's only about $300 billion. The other is for supplemental unemployment insurance. Okay? Big corporations got $500 billion. Small business got $377 billion. And remember, 85% of Americans work for a small and medium-sized business. So there seems to be a disconnect here, but I might be editorializing. State and local governments got $339, public health $153 billion, education $43.7, and then safety net programs around 26. So it provided to a lot of different groups. So they're trying to do this to, one, keep spending going, okay? Not to have it go to shareholders, buyback, executive bonuses. Because, now think about this $2 trillion, how big was the GDP? About $21.5 trillion. So this is about 10% so far of our GDP. Next thing just to talk about is the Affordable Care Act. There's other policy issues that we could take time on, tariffs and trade, energy. When we look at there's a lot of regulatory policy, primarily in the area of environmental, workplace safety, and there's long-term impact of these. In the environment and energy, you've really eliminated a lot of protection for the environment. Okay, that you can now, mines can put residual into creeks, you can have emissions, all sorts of stuff. Same thing on healthcare, food, and education, reducing that, worker safety, reducing it, so in many cases take them out. Now, that can be a really good thing, but it is also, the regulation was put into place from an environmental perspective. Just my opinion. 6 things are going to shape the global credit in 2020. The blue was what it started the year out. Recession risks. We already knew as we started the year that there's going to be a recession in risks and a pronounced global economic slowdown. This little thing out here called COVID-19 is what is making this a greater risk. Lower for longer interest rates? Yes. COVID influences that, and we'll keep that. Trade tensions has not disappeared. In fact, it's raised its head again. Political risks. I don't even want to go there, but across the globe, political risks are huge. ESG impact, disruptive technologies. I think the disruptive technologies, the disruptors are going to be huge. This thing out here called COVID is influencing every one of these. None of these 6 themes have changed for the current year. We just added in COVID. Putting it all together, who knows what's going to happen? There's a tremendous amount of unknown. There's so many different variables that go into this equation. There's a lot of risk in many different areas, and I think we're going to have this U-shaped recovery. It's going to be a longer period that we're down before we come back. But I don't want to leave you with a negative view, because we've gone through, as the American people and as individuals, some of us more than others, simply based on our age, that have hope. I see a lot of hope, and this is going to pass. No doubt about it. There's going to be opportunities. They may not be what we know of. Many of you heard me say that you're going to hold a job that hasn't been invented. We can now say you're going to have a job that has been reinvented. So what can you do? Build the skills you need to be successful in that. Seek out the opportunity. How can you grow? What do you need to do to take advantage of these amazing opportunities that will be out there? Find out what you do well, what was needed, and do it well. So that's where this is sort of the picture, and I think it's important that we understand the environment in which business operates, because it does impact how each of these disciplines, whether it's finance or organizational behavior, what things happen, how they approach it, decision making. But think about how this impacts you personally. You. Jobs. What are going to be in demand? How is work going to change? What are the skills you need to be successful? How are you going to be able to support yourself and your family? These things all influence it. Quality of life, ability to create wealth, planning for the future. These things mean something to you. How does it relate to these courses that we're talking about? Firms operate within an economic environment. These issues impact the strategy the firms to take and the ability to achieve their goals. And that includes financial decisions, it includes human capital decisions, plans for production, including people. I'd like to come back to this slide, that COVID-19 has had a significant impact on business. And these are the things that leaders are looking at, which is part of organizational behavior. And the key things they're looking at that I think are positive, and some of the negatives are communication with employees, company's purpose, the culture, ability to drive execution, and accountability, ability to make decisions, then productivity, ability to meet the needs, and stability in business outcomes. These are all part of what goes into an organization. These are some of the factors that we're going to be looking at over the rest of the semester. If you have any questions, please let me know.